I'm Vladimir Dutip. The winds of war are blowing through the Gulf of Oman. 2 more tankers were attacked. One was set aflame and both were left adrift as their crews abandoned ship. The Gulf is a crucial waterway for oil shipments, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is pointing the finger of blame at Iran. David Martin has the latest from the Pentagon.
One tanker was hit by 3 explosions, which U.S. officials say were caused by mines planted by Iran. Its crew abandoned ship and the vessel burned furiously for hours, sending up a plume of smoke that could be seen from space. The other was hit by 2 explosions. Its crew abandoned ship when it realized there was still one unexploded mine attached to the hull. The U.S. then watched and recorded an Iranian patrol boat coming alongside and removing the unexploded mine from the tanker's hull, in effect, making off with the evidence. That's one reason Secretary of State Pompeo laid the blame squarely on Iran.
It is the assessment of the United States government that the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf of Oman today.
The attacks came on the same day Japan's Prime Minister Abe was in Iran meeting with the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, in an effort to ease tensions, which have been building ever since the U.S. dispatched an aircraft carrier and B-52 bombers to the region in response to intelligence of imminent Iranian attacks.
The supreme leader's government then insulted Japan by attacking a Japanese oil tanker just outside of Iranian waters, threatening the lives of the entire crew, creating a maritime emergency.
The crew from one of the tankers was taken aboard a U.S. Navy warship. The 23 members of the other crew were taken aboard an Iranian naval vessel and are still in Iranian hands. One U.S. official said it's not clear if the crew was in fact rescued or is being detained as possible hostages against the threat of a U.S. military attack. The U.S. Central Command, which controls operations in the Persian Gulf, put out the following statement: "We have no interest in engaging in a new conflict in the Middle East. We will defend our interests, but a war with Iran is not in our strategic interest, nor in the best interest of the international community."
As the first Japanese prime minister to visit Iran in 4 decades, Abe is looking to position himself as a mediator between rivals Tehran and Washington.
No one wants a war. Japan wishes to play an utmost role in its capacity to ease the tension. This is the objective of my trip.
The U.S. and Iran have been sparring in a bitter standoff since U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the landmark Iran nuclear deal last year.
If there has been a rise in tensions in the region, it is because of America's economic war against Iran. Whenever it stops, we will witness a very positive change in the region and the world.
Japan is one of the United States' closest allies, but it also has strong trade ties with Tehran. The island nation has historically been a big purchaser of Iranian oil, but that changed in May when the U.S. reimposed sanctions on all buyers of crude from the Middle Eastern producer. While Tokyo has complied with the sanctions, it still has an interest in ensuring stable oil flows from the region, as it imports almost all of its crude. This puts Japan in a strategic position regarding Iran and the U.S. Its good relations with both countries means Abe could be a communication link between Tehran and Washington.
In other world news, Germany's foreign minister is in Iran looking for ways to save the 2015 nuclear deal. Heiko Maas says a European financial system designed to avoid U.S. sanctions should be up and running soon. The EU, along with the rest of the signatories to the agreement, are standing by it after the U.S. withdrew last year.
There's a serious situation in the region. Escalation of tension is becoming uncontrollable, and military action wouldn't be in line with the interests of any party. I've spoken with all the parties in my regional visit, and no one has called for an escalation of tensions. That's the message I'm conveying from the region. We had intensive talk today on the nuclear deal. Germany, France, and Britain call for supporting the deal, and we are fulfilling our commitments. We can't do any miracle in this regard, but we are doing our utmost efforts to prevent the failure of the deal.
And Iran's foreign minister says his country has never broken the promises it made under the nuclear deal.
The United States has declared economic war against Iran. This war is very dangerous for the region and the international order. The measures taken by the U.S. after its withdrawal from the deal, for us, mean targeting the Iranian nation. Iran has proven that it adheres to international commitments. 15 IAEA reports prove this reality. But Iran is also obligated to defend the rights of the Iranian nation.
Al Jazeera's Dosa Jabari has more now from Tehran.
The Iranian foreign minister held a 2-hour meeting with his German counterpart in what is known as the Hall of Mirrors in the foreign ministry in the capital on Monday. The two discussed various issues, but at the core of it was the future of the nuclear agreement between Iran and the international community. Now, the German foreign minister said that his country is very concerned about escalation in this region between Iran and the United States. And also, the future of this agreement is something the Iranians want to see the European Union uphold. The Iranian foreign minister said that they have to make good on their promises, and that the future of any other dialogue and discussions about Iran's various programs, such as the ballistic missile program, depend on how this nuclear agreement goes forward.
Tensions with Iran, the Iranian foreign minister warning that the U.S. can't expect to stay safe after starting what he called, quote, an economic war. So could the economic pressure backfire on the U.S.? Let's bring in retired General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. First of all, what do you think of these comments coming out of Iran?
Well, I think it's pretty typical. They're full of a lot of bluster, certainly. They're dealing with their domestic audience, and they're under severe economic pressure. You know, their economy's contracted 6%, Melissa. The rial is in the tank in terms of the currency valuation. The inflation's at 37%, food shortages and power outages on a regular basis, and a growing sense of civil unrest in the country. So that's the pressure point that they feel, and that's why these blustery comments. And it's also why our military and intelligence services detected that the Iranians seem to be preparing for some kind of complex attack, either against a U.S. facility or against U.S. troops, which obviously we put troops into the area to safeguard against that possibility.
So the people that don't support the president point to things like that and say that he is making Americans unsafe by putting this much pressure on the regime, as opposed to trying to have a dialogue, that the end result is that they do lash out and kill people, and that would be the fault of the president.
Yeah, that's an argument that can be made, but it really is a specious argument. The president walked away from the nuclear deal or the JCPOA last year, and the Europeans are up in arms about that, as are the Iranians. But look what the deal was doing. It was allowing them, at some point in 15 years, to actually move to a nuclear weapon if they decided to move to a threshold capability in 10 years, which is just around the corner. And the president looked at that and said, no good. That is a lousy deal. He went back to the Europeans for almost a year to work with France, Britain, and Germany to see if we could improve on the deal. They wouldn't make substantive changes to the deal, so then the president walked away from it.
Yeah.
And as a result of the deal, when it was struck initially with the Iranians, they received $130 billion, Melissa, which has been fueling what they've been doing in the Middle East. What are they doing? They run the civil war in Syria. They toppled the Yemen regime, which was friendly to the United States and to our allies. Their undue malign influence inside Iraq. They provide all the rockets and missiles to the Hezbollah and to the Hamas. Hamas just a few weeks ago fired close to 600 at them. Virtually every one of those is an Iranian missile.
So
that's where we are.
Yeah, let me ask you about less extreme cases, because this is an argument that the other side makes a lot, that when we use this economic pressure, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's in the form of sanctions, or it's to lever a negotiation like with Mexico, that it has a real potential to backfire. And for example, one of the arguments with China, that this is a regime that, while they're doing all kinds of things that we don't like, they aren't as bad as regimes before them, and they are more of a friend to the U.S. than China has been in the past, and that if we put this much pressure on them and potentially, cause unrest in China and really damage the economy, that, this could really backfire. And not only, could the economy turn down, but we could end up with a regime that hates America so much more because we've made them miserable.
Well, the fact of the matter is we were hoping that China economic reform would lead to political reform. And that was a lousy bet. They're a more authoritarian, they're a repressive regime. They got 2 million Muslims in a concentration camp. They got tens of thousands in their own jail cells. They've been taking over the Indo-Pacific region during the Obama administration at the expense of our allies in the United States. President Xi makes statements on a regular basis that he fully intends to replace the United States as a global power in the world. So our critics would have us wring our hands over that. Let's treat China like with kid gloves. Let's not impose any tariffs on them. Let's not push back on a militarization of the South China Sea and what they're undermining our allies every single day. Last year, Japan alone had to alert their fighter aircraft because of China's airplanes incursions on Japan 637 times in 1 year. And they're up 30% this year. That's just typical of what is going on. And people have been sitting on their hands, Melissa, and doing nothing. This administration is looking at this problem. It's much more than tariffs, and saying we have got to deal with this. This is the long-term strategic threat to who? To the American people. And anybody that doesn't understand that is just not paying attention. And we've got to have a plan to deal with it. And the administration, I think, is picking up the ball and running with it.
No, it makes all kinds of sense, but I wonder if there's a situation around the world where economic pressure is being put on that you think is inappropriate, where we shouldn't be behaving in this manner. Do you see something like that when you look around the globe? Because it's just the common argument from the other side that, go ahead.
I think the tariff infrastructure imposed on Mexico, if we actually had to do that and had to go beyond the 5 to the 10 to the 15 that the president was talking about in terms of escalation, and given the nature of the trade that takes place on a daily basis with us as a major trading partner, that I think would have had some rather adverse impacts and could have backfired us. But I think what we're doing with China, and it's much more than tariffs that we're pushing back on, is the right policy. We've got a whole of government approach with our allies in dealing with China's aggression. They are the aggressor, not the United States.
Okay.
They've been stealing our intellectual property.
The president's about to break in here.
Good.
General Jack Keane, thank you so much.